Here's the arrow now that the paint is all dried and the clear coat is all dried. One thing I like about this particular clear coat is you can see this part has not been clear coated, but it really matches the rest of the arrow. Plus that clear coat is also going to lend a little bit of strength to this carbon itself. Just to help protect the surface a little bit, because like PVC, the carbon is very hard, so it's more likely to scratch and get damaged when it hits something hard than wood, which is more likely to compress. That's one downside to modern arrows, but because they are so strong, it's usually not an issue. So now that we have this, first thing I like to do is put the knock back. Now, different knocks will have different features, but this one has a little indexer. You can't really see it. It's a little bump on one side, and that tells you where your odd fletch is, the one that's going to stick out, also known as the cock fletch. So you just want to go ahead and stick that in here, and you want to line it up, because you can just sort of make out where the other fletchings were, and you want to line it up accordingly. Once you've done that, we can start fletching this arrow. Now, I'm going to be using feathers. You could go ahead and use plastic vanes. There are lots of different options out there. Most stores, like most sporting goods stores, will carry plastic vanes. Some will even carry feathers now. So if you were to buy feathers, most of them look like this. These are all turkey feathers that have been dyed, cut to shape, and they're all ready to be put on your arrows. Now, there are lots of different options too. You could buy different types of feathers, and there are lots of places online where you can get inexpensive feathers. I prefer to use turkey. At the one extreme, you could start with a raw feather like this, and you can find feathers like this if there are turkeys in your area, or you could even get feathers like this from most craft stores. So if you guys are interested in seeing how to actually take a feather like this, strip it down, and then put it on an arrow, I could show you guys how to do that. I don't do it too often because I usually prefer to buy them pre-cut and ground. When I say ground, the quill has been ground to a uniform thickness. So from this point, it's ready to be just shaped down a little further and put on an arrow. So when I get an arrow like this, or a feather like this, I'll then cut it down to the length I want. So this is 5 inches. As it is here, you could actually put these on an arrow, and they make good flu-flu arrows, meaning that the extra drag from this full-length feather, or this full-height feather, will actually drag the arrow down faster so that it'll go a certain distance, and then usually it'll kind of fall out of the air. It's good if you're shooting at distances and you don't want to lose your arrow, or for, you know, shooting in flight. They call it in-flight shooting. But that's an option too. Now from here, I use this. This is a feather chopper. You can also use a feather burner. With a feather burner, you would put this on your arrow first, and then you would actually burn the feathers down to your desired shape. That gives you a lot of uniformity, and that's one way to go. You could build one yourself. If you were to buy one, they're fairly pricey, but they're not too bad. I like using these because I can buy whatever colors of feathers I want, and I can have a couple of these on hand. This is a chopper. As you can see, it's basically just a metal blade here, and so this is essentially, when you use this, you end up with this. It's basically die cut. And this is a machine similar to this is how most store-bought feathers are cut to shape. So if you look down in the description below, I'll put some links to alternative methods of fletching. I have some videos where I show different methods of fletching an arrow, either without a jig or with a homemade jig. But today I'm going to show you the jig that I actually use. This is the Jojan Mono Fletcher. It's really simple. You just take your arrow, place the nock, there's a little nock cup at the bottom to make sure it's in there nice and secure. There you go. And now you take your feather clamp, which will hold your feather, and place your feather into the clamp. It's very simple. There are lots of different glues you can use. There are some household cements that you can buy. Super glue works great if you're going to use a super glue. I prefer something that's a little on the thicker side, gap filling, and rubber toughened if possible. So anything that says impact resistant super glue will work really well. There are also purpose made adhesives. You just got to make sure that it's compatible with what you're gluing it to. Now, I personally like using fletching tape. It allows me to easily strip feathers off if I need to refletch an arrow. It's also really easy to put them on, and I don't need to wait a long time for things to dry. So to use the fletching tape, and you guys have seen me use this before, it's pretty straightforward. Start at the front of your feather. Start it down, and I like to start a little bit down from the top. That way, when I put my super glue on here, I can actually have my glue holding down the very front of the arrow, or the feather, because I like to have glue on the front and back. You need a little bit of glue to help keep it in place, otherwise it will tend to move around. So now you take a sharp knife, and you just want to cut the tape. There we go. Now that your tape is cut, you just want to push it on there and take the tape off, or take the backing off, I should say. Now I apply my super glue, a little bit on the back, push this down, a little bit on the front. Once that's done, I just go ahead, line it up, make sure everything is nice and even, and then I press the fletching onto the arrow. Once I've got this on there, I like to let it sit for about 30 seconds, that way the super glue has time to cure. Now that it's had a little bit of time to dry, I just take this off, and you want to push the feather down. There it is. So now you just turn it, and then you put your other two feathers on. So I'm going to go ahead, finish this up, and I'll show you what it looks like. Now here's the arrow all fletched up. So now one thing that I like to do, as you can see on the front here, it's a pretty smooth transition, but there is a little bit of roughness there. And so this feather could catch, and this is a point where either the feather could come off, or it could scratch your hand or the rest, or what have you. There are many ways to smooth this out. One way is to take a knife or a razor blade and trim this edge down, and then put a little bit of super glue over it. One thing that I've been doing recently is using a 5-minute epoxy and just putting a little bit of epoxy on the front there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for you guys. So I've got my epoxy here. I'm just going to put a little bit, and I'm actually going to mix up enough for the full set of 6, so once I've done showing you guys I can finish everything out. But I'm just mixing a little bit of epoxy on this piece of cardboard. Alright, so there we are. We've got equal parts. Mix them together. And then you just want to kind of let it, once you've mixed it really thoroughly, you want to let it set for just a little bit. And then to apply, it's really simple. You just take a little bit on the end here, and you want to go right into that transition between feather and arrow, and just put a little drop there. And you want it to basically smooth over all the edges. And you can see that little droplet right there. And that's all you want to do. You got to do that for the other 2 sections. Alright, there it is. So once that cures, I would say give it about an hour or so. But once it cures, you're all done. I've gone ahead and put the epoxy on all of these, so you can see now they're all fletched, nicely finished. And here's our finished arrows. So we went from one set of cheap Walmart arrows into some really nice looking arrows that I'm sure will fly really well. So the next step is, once these are fully cured in a few days, I'll be shooting them for you guys. So here they are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.